AI Classifies. So it can classify something as a tanker or a ship or a submarine for that matter. However, Space AI personalizes it, it identifies. So AI classifies, Space AI identifies, because we can identify not only the vehicle, but the driver of the vehicle, and fundamentally through biometrics, and we can tell if the driver's sleepy or not, potentially. And we reckon 14 out of the 17 SDGs will be significantly enhanced by the ability to measure and to monitor the planet in a way that's never been done before or seen before.
Hello and welcome to WGIC, the World Geospatial Industry Council. Our guest today is Chris Newlands, founder and CEO of Space AI.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me along, Bhanu. I really appreciate the opportunity to share our message to the other members and the wider audience.
Chris, thank you so much for this time. I'm really enamored with your biography. From a stint in Royal Navy to a successful career in financial services, you have moved on to found Space AI to become recognized as the top 10 space entrepreneur by TechRound, just behind Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Sir Richard Branson. And that's fantastic run, I feel, professionally and as an entrepreneur. I wish to introduce the entrepreneur Chris Newlands to WGIC audience.
Yeah, of course. The TechRound article was very flattering, I've got to say, but fundamentally, I wish I had their money. That's the first thing I would say. But fundamentally, it has been commented that we have some of the keys to the commercialization of space. So not the money necessarily, but certainly the keys to the commercialization of space. Fundamentally, I started my entrepreneurial journey about 10 years ago, and I'm open to any questions you may have around that too, Bhanu.
Okay. So let's deep dive into Space AI. Space AI was born as the innovative idea of bringing remote sensing technology to the consumer. Can you take us through the journey of Space AI?
Of course. I approximately 7 years ago now, I came up with a concept in the shower, would you believe? Because that's where the best ideas tend to arise. And the idea was to capture live events and people attending live events from space in real time. And we come up with the concept of Spelfie, which was space selfies back in the day. And that was 2017. So long story short, we started to build the concept out, spoke to a number of organisations. They included Maxar and Airbus at the time, and the ability to capture live events from space and the attendees from there. So if you can imagine the ability to take a real-time satellite image and identify yourself attending Glastonbury or Wimbledon or the Super Bowl, for example. Yeah, so that souvenir and that ability to capture, especially in temporary environments where obviously it's the festival, for example, is built and exists for a week and obviously disappears thereafter and becomes fields. The ability to capture that real experience became quite intoxicating. So fundamentally, we worked with the BBC on an article. It was actually a documentary, in fact, where there were two young climate warriors, for want of a better term, Malati and Isabel Widson of Bali. And what they did is they convinced the governor to ban plastic bags and a step towards obviously doing something that would actually help the ecosystem as such and the climate. So fundamentally that went ahead. So the BBC wanted to capture an event that actually celebrated that. So we captured the words "Act Now" on a volcanic beach using 300 meters of white cotton, and all the local villagers actually turned out in their local dress, and we actually captured that from space, the words "Act Now," in real time as the satellite passed over. And that was an amazing reaction we got from that. And fundamentally, we went to the top 10 of all app downloads in history, we believe, in a single week, which was obviously really rather exciting. And that was launched in 2019 in November. Thereafter, Obviously, COVID unfortunately had a massive impact on all the major events in 2020. So we went into hibernation mode. But whilst we were doing that, we'd apply for patents to protect effectively the idea of capturing that user-generated content or Internet of Things data merged with real-time satellite imagery. And that proceeded during as we were waiting for everyone to emerge from COVID. And our first patent was granted in the United States, and it's now been granted in Japan and also China now too. So we're really quite excited by that.
Okay, that's a fantastic way to capture the imagination of the people, I guess.
Well, I think it's everyone takes selfies these days, I suppose, as well. But it's not really. Really, Spelfie is more of a prototype, Bhanu. I think fundamentally for us, it demonstrates a use case, but there are millions of use cases of the merger of real-time satellite imagery and IoT data. It creates a whole new vision of the planet. It brings the planet into context, if you like, as well. And I think just the ability to move from maps into something a bit more dynamic and actually real-time is really exciting. A number of countries, for that matter, never mind just large technology businesses too.
Out of the many millions of experiences and inputs probably you may have gotten about the Spelfie, would you want to cite one of the very interesting inputs that you have received on the Spelfies?
So I think the BBC one was obviously the first one, which is always the most exciting one. But the feedback has been exceptional, Bhanu, to be honest. I mean, I think to go to the top 10% of all app downloads in history in a single week is in itself worth celebrating. But actually, what I think it did for us, it probably confirmed that actually there's a desire for satellite imagery and to be placed in context of that. And obviously, there are fantastic brands out there like Google Earth, for example, and they're probably the consumer's way currently to utilising real-time or to utilising satellite imagery. And fundamentally, I think there's been over 1 billion app downloads of that. So just to see the world from a different perspective, I think is of interest. We bring the real-time element to that. So fundamentally, if you imagine a map and then Google Earth and then potentially what we will be bringing to the marketplace as well, it's just the next step. It's moving it from maps to historic imagery to real-time imagery. And all of that combined together, I think is really, really quite exciting.
Yeah, indeed it is. Yeah. So how is Space AI leveraging the power of artificial intelligence and IoT to make the real-time satellite imagery more valuable to both the consumers, of course, but to the businesses in various industries?
So AI is really interesting. It's been a massive change in everyone's mindset in the last 18 months to 2 years now. In some cases longer. So we're talking to a country just now that have an oil and gas production level which has been reduced by theft or misappropriation, let's call it. Yeah. So the ability to actually take a satellite image as the satellite passes over and using IoT data to be able to identify all the people who should be in the satellite picture, the oil and gas workers, security, their vehicles potentially as well, and then use AI to identify who should not be in the satellite picture, because you can identify vehicles, classifications of vehicles from space as such. So that ability to give actionable insights, we think is really encouraging and actually reduce the climate impact, because obviously if you steal oil, you're not that bothered about patching back up the pipeline necessarily. So there's a damage environmentally that is caused by that. You have to produce more oil, which again has implications for the planet also. And out with that as well, you're in a situation where you can reduce theft, which obviously increases the country's GDP, which it has a positive impact in the entire economy as such. And we find that really interesting too. But I think to summarise the difference between AI and space AI, I think is probably quite simple in some ways, because AI classifies. So it can classify something as a tanker or a ship or a submarine for that matter. However, Space AI personalizes it, it identifies. So AI classifies, Space AI identifies, because we can identify not only the vehicle, but the driver of the vehicle, and fundamentally through biometrics, and we can tell if the driver's sleepy or not, potentially. Now, you have to opt into this. Privacy is sacrosanct. but you can understand how the ability to see the world and actually see your family potentially, if you've got vulnerable adults or vulnerable children. So it's not just a person, it's your son, it's your daughter, it's you, or for that matter, your pet potentially too. So just that other layer, that additional layer of personalisation. Because if you use AI to identify a person, it's a breach of your human rights and your privacy laws. Space AI brings the personalisation element to that too. And we're again incredibly excited by the potential. So to us, it's an additional, but probably the most important layer of data, because by personalising the data, putting you in the satellite picture in real time, it means more. It gives you context.
Fantastic. I think I really like the way you summarized it. AI classifies, but space AI identifies.
Well, it's hard to sometimes. I mean, AI is all encompassing, but the key thing is for us, if you can imagine, it can count. We use an example of cows in a field. So if you can imagine a picture of cows from space, yeah. So AI can tell you they're cows. It can tell you that there are 59 cows in that particular field. It can tell you 10 are white, 7 are brown, and the rest are black. But using IoT data, merged with that real-time satellite image, I can tell you the names of the cows. I can tell you if they're in good health or in poor health. If they've fallen over, they might need a human intervention. I can also show you if there's a flood, a fire, or an earthquake. And that's the difference between seeing something green with a background, which is a picture or a map, and then the pins, and something that's actually showing you what's happening and evolving in real time.
That's true, Chris. I completely agree with Chris. My next question is about something that every single industry is handling right now. And that's where I found it very impressive that you bet big on collaborative space strategy and how it holds answers to solving the climate challenges. Can you enumerate your thoughts on this and probably would want to cite an example?
Yes, of course. I think if we're going to challenge or take on a challenge like climate change, we need to be able to understand what's happening all the time, everywhere, yeah, to make better, more informed decisions as consumers, as businesses, and fundamentally by having that data, that real-time data, then you can decide whether you leave the house in the morning to go to work just yet, because you might be joining a traffic queue that's emitting fumes potentially, yeah, and because there's been an accident in the motorway potentially. The traffic cones that were there last night, are they still there this morning, rather than taking a 5-mile detour? There's a number of personalised things you can use when it comes to better data. But more importantly, we've analysed our strategy and looked at the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, and we reckon 14 out of the 17 SDGs will be significantly enhanced by the ability to measure and to monitor the planet in a way that's never been done before or seen before. This is an entirely new sector, Bhanu. It's not a product, it's a capability that we hope and plan to make available to everyone, everywhere. And I think that's really, really important moving forward. So I think just that ability to see the world in the whole and make better, more informed and efficient decisions will help to, obviously, from a climate perspective also.
I'm certainly in sync with your thoughts, Chris. And I also see that you believe Earth observation is underutilized and undervalued. Again, I am in sync with you with this. But I want to hear from you. What are some of the strategies the sector can adopt to position itself as a game-changing technology to solve the complex problems of the world?
So we actually do need Starlink and Kuiper and OneWeb. We do need the communications from space. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. That capability creates opportunities for everyone. There are 2 or 3 billion people that actually can't access Wi-Fi on a regular basis, even to this day. So the ability for that to become available, I think, is a game changer. However, the Earth observation has been almost a poor cousin, in my opinion, in many ways. Because fundamentally it's always been about if you take what the consumer or what the academics can actually access, it tends to be historic satellite imagery. It's not what's happening now. It's something that happened 6 months ago, and they can measure things, and all of that is fantastic and really, really useful. But the ability to see the world in real time, or real time when it's now. So fundamentally, satellites are passing overhead just now every few hours. Within a matter of months, it'll be every few minutes, and by the end of the decade, it'll be every few seconds. sense. Yeah. So if you start to imagine a new commercial world, a new commercial model where we can help satellite owners and operators sell every image they take tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, that brings down the price point of satellite imagery significantly and makes it more accessible, whilst hopefully increasing the return on their investment for their investors, because investors want a good return on their money too. So if you're in a situation where you can get Earth observation to become more commercially viable, then there'll be the access points to all sectors, not just defence and security, which is obviously the primary use for Earth observation up to this point to some degree. But if you go back to 2016, there were 400 Earth observation satellites around the planet, mostly owned by governments and agencies. Now there are 1,600, now mostly owned by commercial entities. And by the end of the decade, 66 months from now, we're looking at 12,000 is the forecast, Earth observation satellites looking down on Earth and giving us data that we can make better, more informed decisions. So for me, the underutilization is partly because of rules and regulations that have been set to protect the world and make it safer, but actually we need to understand the impact of that on those rules and remove some of the shackles potentially and actually make the world just a bit more visible and a bit more accessible for all.
Yeah, and one of the things I was speaking with another expert in Earth observation and space, the major concern is the turnaround time, the accessibility of the Earth observation imagery and the analytics on the fly. So when that capability is readily available, I think the applications will start mushrooming, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, latency is a big problem just now. You're looking at, depending on the type of satellite image you're taking, for some providers it can be a day or so before you get the image, for some it can be hours, but there are projects in place just now that they're looking at bringing it down to somewhere between 3 and 25 minutes. So if you take Moore's law, which means obviously the capability of technology doubles every 2 years, by the end of this decade, we're very confident, as are others, that we will be able to bring down significantly the latency, the time taken from taking the image to getting it to your smart device potentially. And partly that's to do with the large constellations of Earth observation satellites and the ability to actually communicate with ground stations more readily, which are now being built in much more larger numbers now as well. So the ability to download the data quicker using lasers potentially as well and avoiding cloud cover is something that will actually enhance and increase the actual the latency, or reduce the latency, in terms of the satellite imagery getting to devices to make them more useful, everyday useful as such.
Thank you for this detail, Chris. That now brings me to the next part of the interview, and that is about Space Eye's association with WGIC. Space Eye is one of the newest members of WGIC, and congratulations on that. And I want to understand what brings Space Eye to WGIC, and how do you see the business aspirations aligning with WGIC?
Well, so WGIC has a number of world-class brands already as members, and I think the quality of the actual membership is what attracted us, to be honest. Fundamentally, they are already geospatial specialists. They are world-class at what they do, and we're hoping and planning to collaborate with all the members and others that are not members too, to actually add another data layer to their existing services. We're not looking to compete, we're looking to enhance, collaborate and work alongside existing infrastructures, because that's the quickest way. And to be honest, some of the societal benefits of what we're going to bring to the in terms of capability need to be out there as quick as they possibly can, because it will save lives potentially. There's a myriad of use cases, wildfires for example, the ability to see the responders in real time from space and actually make better, more informed decisions, saving, obviously, putting the fire out quickly, hopefully, more quickly, and reducing CO2. So actually, if we're in a situation where we can reduce loss of life and the climate impact, the quicker we get this out to the market, the better. So our belief is to stand on the shoulders of giants and work alongside some of the existing infrastructure in a way that actually adds value to both parties, a symbiotic benefit, if you like.
Absolutely.
The other thing I would say is that you have a phrase which is geospatial in everything, geospatial for everyone. We have everything everywhere for everyone. Yeah, so fundamentally that's a very similar thought process. Yeah, and actually location and the ability to contextualize where you are in the world is really the benefit of geospatial and the sector itself. And by bringing real-time satellite imagery, we're of the belief that's something that will be attractive. And on the back of several conversations already, that seems to be the case.
Fantastic. In fact, one of the reasons why we are doing this conversation is also because to be able to help other members and the larger just industry understand and know about the capabilities and how we can bring like-minded companies together or members together to develop, leverage each other's strengths and develop solutions which in a much faster way, isn't it?
Yeah, well, that's when I met with one of your executive directors, that came across very strongly. I mean, fundamentally, what we are planning to bring to the world doesn't currently exist. It's going to take 12 to 18 months to build this, but we're a customer of satellite imagery and a supplier of satellite imagery. So we know the problems, we understand the sector, and we're now going to industrialize our existing processes. So again, everyone has the chance to influence the conversation, which again, hopefully is quite exciting too.
Yes. So that brings me to the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for giving us valuable time and giving us very important inputs in terms of the company, in terms of your association with WGIC, and also your thoughts on the larger geospatial, rather Earth observation industry as well. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure, Bhanu, and thank you again for the opportunity. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.